Welcome to another SEC baseball preview by Southern Sports Gumbo. We're going to be breaking down the Texas A&M Aggies tonight. Kevin, what do you have for us on the Aggies?
So Texas A&M was a team that last year was a preseason number one, and by a lot of people. They had, it's one thing to get hit with the injury bug. It's another thing to get your few best players hurt and have to miss the season, and that is exactly what happened to them last year. And they still almost made the NCAA tournament. But I would tell you that I'm going to just start with their injuries. The first injury that hurt them started actually the end of the season where they made it to the college champion World Series championship with Shane Sadal, one of their left-handers that was really pitching well, having to have Tommy John surgery, and then he missed all of last year, and he's back this year. And then, at the beginning of the season, you had Caden Sorrell that was hurt before the season, and then Gavin Grahovic goes out, in the first 10 games and misses the rest of the season. Sorrell comes back, gets hurt again, and these are not just good players. Grahovic and Sorrell are going to be first round draft picks, and Sadal, he could end up um, being a top 3, 4 round draft pick too. So I say that to say this: a lot of people are not really talking much about Texas A&M this year. I'm not going to tell you they got a lot of depth, but if you just look at their starting lineup, they're really good. And so I'll just kind of get into their lineup and break them down there from that. Let me start with just their everyday lineup, and I'll start in their outfield. So in their outfield, you've got Caden Sorrell, who's again a potential 20 home run guy, over 300. He will, slugging percentage will be six, maybe low sevens. He was over seven last year. You have a transfer, Jake Dewar, that is again a really good hitter. Can he transition that to the SEC? But he had over 300 last year and over, around 15 home runs. And then Wesley Jordan, who is a fifth year guy, transfer from Baylor, played again, in the Big 12, hit 330, 10 home runs. Can he transition that to SEC play? Probably will end up as the DH, might play in the outfield some. But their best three fielders from an outfield standpoint will be Sorrell, Dewar, and then Terrence Kill, who played a lot as a freshman last year. And I look to see him, he hit around 280, 7, 8 home runs last year. I really look to see him kind of get up over 310 home run type player. Really good fielder, and can run, do a lot of different things. So you look at that outfield is going to be really solid if Dewar transitions his bat to the SEC. Then you get into the infield, and you have Gavin Grahovic, who we mentioned, who could play first or third. They kind of have him penciled in to play first this year, kind of best for their team. Again, potential 20 home run guy. He's going to hit over 300. And you add Chris Hakopian, who is one of the best shortstops in baseball this year. He hit, over 330 with, over 600 slugging percentage. A lot of people see him as a potential first round draft pick. So when you take Sorrell, Grahovic, Hakopian, what the talent that they're going to bring and the hitting that they're going to bring to this team, they're going to be very formidable. You got Ben Roy at second, and then a freshman who really is highly recruited with Nico Portita at third base, who might, adjust and play a different position in the infield if needed. And then from a bench standpoint, another bench, I don't consider the bench real deep. Travis Chestnut, Blake Binder up, Sawyer Farr. Farr is more of an infielder, Binder up first base type guy. And then I didn't mention Bear Harrison, who's their catcher, transferred last year, and I expect him, to have a solid year. Better, he'll be in the top half of the catchers in the SEC, in my opinion. So, again, really good everyday lineup. Maybe not a lot of depth if someone were to get hurt, but if these guys can stay healthy, if these nine can stay healthy, they'll score plenty of runs. And then that takes me to their pitching staff. Look, they lost not just a starter last year, they lost Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and three starters that really kind of helped keep this team together. Ryan Prager led that group. Um, but they had three really good starters that's left. And they also had to replace the pitching coach. And so Dylan Olszewski is their new pitching coach, and so he's got talent to work with. Weston Moss, who was a bullpen guy, they look to him and his arm talent to be a starter, potentially to be a Friday night guy. I think that depends on how Sadal comes back, because I think if he, when he closed the season there in 24 when they played in the College World Series, he was pitching as good as anybody on that staff, and they had moved into a starting role before he had the arm injury. So I think it's the potential that he could move into that Friday night before the end of the season. Then some other talented guys have got Josh Stewart, Clayton Freshcorn, um, Michael Barnes, Landon Stump, and Logan Redeman is a transfer that they have from the West Coast. So they've got plenty of good arm talent that they can mesh this pitching staff together. No real proven starters in my mind other than Sadal, even though Moss has pitched well for them. Um, but I think there's plenty of arms there to get them through series, especially with the everyday lineup they have. It's Michael Early's second year. If you look at his record, some would say he disappointed last year. I would say with the injuries, maybe not disappointed is fair. I would also say where you could make disappointed fair is obviously getting swept by Missouri with a chance. You win one game, two, and it's on your home field. You win two, and you're in the NCAA tournament for sure. So that had to be a big letdown, and I guess you could create the year as a disappointment when you had that right in front of you and you didn't convert that. But I like this lineup. I like this team. We can kind of talk what we think their record's going to be in a second. But I think there's a lot of potential in this team, and there's definitely some top end outstanding talent on the team. What's your thoughts, D Mac?
Yeah, there's one freshman that I really like outside of Nico Partita. Boston Kellner, I think, is going to factor in somewhere here for the Aggies. He's a guy who can play infield and the outfield. I think there's a very good chance that Hakopian moves to second, and you could see Kellner and Partita as true freshmen handling the left side of the infield. So, they brought in a lot of good freshmen, especially those two guys. Yeah, they've got a few other freshmen that I like a lot. Luke Billings is a guy who plays outfield. Jerian Wilson is another guy. And then from the transfer portal, I mean, you mentioned, Copian and Dewar. Zane Becker, who's going to be their backup catcher. He was a backup behind Helfrich at Arkansas. He's another guy who I think can provide some value to them. And then from a schedule standpoint, they have a very interesting schedule. They're going to play UCLA at the end of the month, Arizona State, and Virginia Tech. From a non-conference standpoint, they've got Lamar, who's a quality, mid-major team. They're going to play Houston. Um, and then when you get into their SEC schedule, they miss Arkansas and Tennessee, along with South Carolina, Kentucky, and Alabama. They go on the road to Oklahoma, Missouri, LSU, Florida, and Ole Miss. And then home games against Texas, Vandy, Auburn, Mississippi State, and Georgia are all going to be tough challenges. I'll let you dive into your predictions on how you think they do, but they've got a pretty tough SEC schedule. We talked last night about the Longhorns having a really easy schedule. The Aggies definitely got the short end of the stick with the scheduling overall.
Yeah, I think they may have the toughest schedule in the SEC. To be honest with you, they play a lot of the big boys and the best teams in the conference. From that standpoint, I'm going to say the easiest prediction for me to give them would be the typical Aggie type season, which I'm gonna throw them in there about 15-15 just because of the schedule. I will say this though, if for some reason their pitching breaks out and plays a little bit above what I would expect their pitching staff to do, in other words, if they maximize their talent on that pitching staff, I think they could go 17-13, maybe an 18-12, but probably not. I think they're from a 14-16 to a 17-13, and I really like 15-15, 16-14 type season, and that's simply because their lineup. And you mentioned Kellner, and you're exactly right. I think he factors into this team somewhere too. I really like their lineup, 1 through 9, and their players that they've got. And again, their three best, Sorrell, Grahovic, Akopian. We've talked about some really good teams. There's probably not another team in college baseball with three guys like that on their team. Not just good offensive guys, but really good defensive players too. So I think from that they're going to be a tough team to play. They do have a tough schedule, but if you're a team, you don't want to play this team because they're going to bring the bats every night. And you could go into a series with A&M and win one out of the series. And I don't care that where I'm going with that. You get swept too, but your best teams, your Texases, your LSU's, your Auburns, your UCLA's, if they play in the in the playoffs once they get into that piece of the season. This team A&M can win 2 out of 3 just because of the bats that they bring and they playing if they're hitting the balls. It's a really good team, and if you play them, you're gonna have to play your best to get past them, I guess, is where I'm going with it. So that would be my thoughts. A tough schedule, 15, 15, 16, and 14 type SEC team. Few breaks in the pitching to kind of pitch about. Again, say a guy like Sadal finishes like he did the last month of 2024, they could get to 17-13 in the SEC. Someone like Fresh Corn really comes on and, he's not pitched a lot, but let's say he pitches really well, becomes a starter. Weston Moss gives them everything they think. If they maximize that, who knows?
Yeah, I'm just a hair lower than you. I've got them as a 14-16 team. If things go really well, I could see them getting to that 18-12 mark. But in the same sense, with this coaching staff, obviously not the most liked people in College Station right now after the poor season last year. I could also see the wheels falling off a bit and going 10-20 if things go bad. So they're kind of, I'd put floor or kind of what I expect in that 14-16, maybe 15-15 range. But I could see 3 to 5 wins or losses either way on those numbers, going the other way, which for me, they're probably one of the toughest teams to project because on paper they've got it all. But even with some of the injuries last year, they still had a lot on paper and really underperformed big time last year.
Would agree with that. With their pitching staff, they should have been in the NCAA tournament, no question.
Any final thoughts on A&M?
No, again, I think we've hit it. A lot of talent on this team. It's a fun team to watch. They're going to hit a lot of home runs with those main guys and the other guys that they have on the team. And the big question is going to be the pitching talent. How does it develop, and does it maximize to turn into the best season that they could have with this group of people? It's a team that if that pitching gets right, that could make a College World Series. Would be an outside stretch, but they could.
Well, that's a wrap for Aggie baseball tonight. We'll see you guys with 3 more previews before the season starts. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, tell your friends and family about us, and we'll keep bringing you guys awesome SEC baseball content all year long.